We are live. We are live. Hello, critical thinkers. Hope all is well. Today, we have a very, very special guest with us today. We have Michelle Bonet, who is a criminal justice advocate and the founder of New York State Docs Federal Oversight. But before we get to Michelle, a quick 30-second commercial. For those of you joining us, please like the stream, hopefully I'll be able to talk tonight. Please like the stream, like the video, comment below, share it with others. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. It greatly helps with the algorithm. As many of you may or may not know, YouTube is not very friendly to this type of content. So the more subscribers, the more you as an audience get this message out there, the greater it helps us here today. So again, I want to thank everyone for being here. And if y'all can do me a favor, please write MB in the chat. Please write MB in the chat. And also let me know where you are viewing from. If you're viewing from New York State, if you're upstate, if you're from a different country, please write that in the chat. Now let's welcome Michelle and write MB in the chat now. So Michelle, thank you for being here, and thank you for finally being able to come on with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. I really appreciate the work you do. It's so important to get the word out about everything that's happening in the world, and I appreciate your focus.
No, thank you, and your Facebook group is an amazing resource for families that have incarcerated loved ones. And so I just want to thank you for the work that you do, and many a lot of the content that feeds into this YouTube channel in part comes from people like JB Nicholas, the freelance, and also your group, because we have family members who are bringing attention and bringing light to the issues that incarcerated loved ones are facing. So thank you for that. If you could just do us a favor, for those people out there who don't know you, can you let us know who you are and more about your group?
Sure. So I'm formerly incarcerated, and while I was incarcerated, I realized that the system was very defunct, and thought for the years that I was in there about what I could do. And I really realized that people needed to get together. That was the problem. There was no central location where people could find each other. You had people similarly situated, but there's so many different prisons in New York State that there wasn't one place where people could go. So I formed New York State Docs Federal Oversight. Initially as a campaign, I thought if I could get federal oversight into the prisons in New York State, we could address problems that maybe are difficult to address because they deal with compromised systems. You know, there's
Mhm.
so a lot of dark edges there that really need to be brought to light. And I thought by bringing the families together, we'd have a repository of just information that we could share with one another, a way to understand how other people deal with the problems that they face, but also a really great central point for advocacy. And magically it happened. You know, they say if you build it, they will come. And I started reporting the news, specifically cultivating
Mhm.
news for the Department of Corrections in New York State. And families gravitated toward it. And I remember when we only had a few members, we had a 3, 4, 5. I got excited when we had 15 people. And we're really a community that, you know, assist each other. We have 1,600 members now. And we have the press, and we have advocates,
Mhm.
and we have families, and we have formerly incarcerated people. And we work together to provide support, to provide information, to provide resources, and to help as the central point for advocacy. And it's been an incredible thing, and it's so fulfilling.
Mm. So, what would you say was your entryway or gateway into doing the advocacy work? You mentioned you were incarcerated previously, but besides from that, like what kind of motivated you and pushed you to go into this line of work?
Well, I mean, I have a background in staffing and operations prior to my incarceration and technology. So when I went into the prison system and looked around and saw that there were operations that weren't being followed and there's procedure, but it wasn't being used, I realized that a lot of the problems in there were founded in this just lack of adherence to policy and procedure. Um, I went in there and I tried to help people get their GEDs. I was a teacher's assistant. I wanted to just to help out at first as best I could and to keep my head down and come out the other side whole. That is not what happened. um, I moved. I was moved 8 hours away from my family to Albion Correctional. I live in Westchester, so my priority was earning something called trailer visits (FRP), and I
Mm,
did this so that when my families came to visit, they could stay for 3 days instead of one day, which we could visit in a private setting rather than visit in a visit room. And it was a
yeah,
prestigious program and difficult to earn, but I did earn it. However, they implemented a faulty drug test system 2 weeks before that. And I was victimized by it and pulled off my trailer and spent a significant amount of time in SHU fighting the case and realized that the hearings were just as absurd as everything else I was seeing. And I had never gone through the disciplinary process. So as I went through this, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. And I couldn't get any rational resolve for my problem and had to take it to state Supreme Court and ultimately won for myself and others similarly situated. And that began my saga. I guess at that point, I realized I couldn't keep my head down anymore. There were solutions. I could see
hmm
them. I could see what the problems were. And I guess it became very difficult not to look back. And
mm,
that began my saga. I became a jailhouse attorney, as they like to say, jailhouse lawyer. I was working in law library and helping women get visitation of their children back or divorced, or whether that was helping people who were not bilingual, who were given disciplinary proceedings without a translator. Just these simple things that I think were really creating a sentiment that permeates through a facility, and when injustice is present in a place that you're being penalized for not being um appropriate. If you're not following the rules and you end up in prison, but now you sit in there and watch other people not follow the rules and those are your jailers, it could be a little twisted. And I don't think that it's a
yeah,
good foundation for what we're trying to do in corrections, right? I think what we want to do is display and lead by our behavior for those who work there, first and foremost, integrity and these things that we're trying to yield from the years of incarceration for a human being, right? We want them to come out the other side and have value to themselves and add value to their community. And this just doesn't source from what I saw in there. It's just,
mm,
I can understand how we weren't getting the results that we were looking for, and there's so much money being spent, and
yeah,
it just didn't make sense to me.
yeah. So going back to something you mentioned before, you mentioned that you had this privilege of being able to go into these trailers and have this family visitation for 3 days, and that seems like is that program still around, by the way?
It's suspended like everything else
It's
right now
suspended.
due to lack of staffing, as we are still
Okay.
short the what I mean 2000 or some odd COs that walked out and have not um, their roles have not been refilled. Obviously, there is a huge
Mm, yeah.
recruitment campaign going on right now, but we are very low on numbers, and it's
Yeah.
created a state of emergency in there, in that we can't fulfill our obligations to our incarcerated with regard to programming, visitation, just simple things like package room delivery and their mail. I mean, it's the way that it's affecting the people in there is it's countless.
Countless. Yeah. So going back to
So
this drug testing. So when you were a part of this program, you had to be drug tested. Now you mentioned that the test was faulty and there was problems with this testing. So um, I'm going to assume that once docs figured out that this test was faulty, they corrected it or no?
uh, no. No, so I guess I'll frame this for you. The first people that were affected by this were people who were voluntarily surrendering their urine for
Okay.
prestigious programs, work release, trailers. So it's not like the first big collective of people who turned up saying, "Hey, I'm not doing drugs. What do you mean?" These are all your model inmates all across the state. I mean, to me, it didn't take a genius to figure out what was going on. And no, they didn't own it. And they should have known because this machine is called the Thermoscientific Indigo Plus Analyzer. And
Okay.
I mean, there's a whole behind story, whereas there was a person who used to work for Docs that went to work for this company and then convinced Docs to use this company.
Mm,
And so this testing system, and yeah, that's the whole backstory behind it. But then
yeah.
furthermore, the machine was designed for preliminary use only. So what that meant was it wasn't designed to take away somebody's liberty interest. It was a screening process. And it was an early screening. So if something went wrong, you should be entitled to confirmatory testing.
Mm,
But
yeah.
New York
Yeah.
State did not allow the incarcerated to have confirmatory testing because the old system that they used was so accurate, the judiciary took that right away from us. So when they
Mm,
migrated to a less accurate system, in theory, they should have firmed up their policy or created a means for confirmatory testing. But even worse was they never gave the list of approved pharmacology to the machine's manufacturer to properly calibrate the test.
mm,
So this machine had no, these pieces of information are supposed to be provided to the manufacturer of the urinalysis to properly calibrate the assay, which is the framework for the testing. So there's an assay
yeah.
for K2, there's an assay for marijuana. Each one of these has to be calibrated properly to account for medicines. Now, there's a very limited amount of medication we're allowed to use within the Department of Corrections as incarcerated individuals. So we're not talking about the wide range of every medicine out there. I mean, we're talking about a
Yeah.
handful of medicines we're allowed to use. So all of this together, it just it continued to add insult to injury. I carried those tickets for a full calendar year where I lost my job, I lost my housing, I lost my access to the college program. And, this was detrimental to me, but it was detrimental to people all over the state. This wasn't just
Yeah.
happening to me. But I think that was kind of
About
the
how,
final straw. I'm
got
sorry, go
it.
ahead.
About how many, no, I'm sorry. About how many people do you think were affected by this faulty testing and
I
docs?
think it's between I think it's up to upward of 1,500 people. And then there was a whole nother drug failure for another testing system they were using that happened a year later, and parts of these overlapped. So, but this specific one, the Indigo Plus Analyzer, the investigator general did a huge report. Actually, if you look at that report, I'm the person cited in it. And
Mm,
it was a lot of people, and they're still trying to figure it out because you had people that were popping for different things. You had it's still, they're trying to sort out the classes, so this class action suit is
yeah.
still going on. And and like everything else, the injury takes forever to resolve because of the way the systems operate, because we're dealing with administrative law. So you have to exhaust everything within the administration before you can go for a judicial intercession. So I had to go through grieving everything to the end and fighting all of these tickets to the end, appealing everything to the end before I was even allowed to go and ask a judge to look at it objectively.
Mm.
So
And
I
how
mean, and this
difficult
is the
and
problem
challenging?
that we see.
Mm.
Oh, it was
And how
horrible.
difficult and
I Very
I was
challenging.
gonna ask you,
As somebody who,
yeah.
I mean, I have a background in being able to read, and I was trained in law library, but I'm not an attorney, and I had to take that myself because there's really very few attorneys who do that work. It's expensive to hire an attorney to do an Article 78. It'll cost you upward of 10 grand. Who can do
Wow.
that? So I did it myself, and it was grueling work, 9 weeks of intense studying and making sure I was citing things properly. And yeah, and then we don't have electronics. We have to actually do this
Mm.
by mail and make copies. And it's archaic,
Wow.
very challenging
Wow.
process.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Sounds like it. So because of this, you ended up in the shoe. You had your restrictions. I'm sorry. You had restrictions on you. You had privileges taken away, and it took you some time. You said a year before this was able to be corrected.
Yeah. From the point I was on a trailer visit with my kids, from the point that I walked out because I didn't know this was happening to me. I said, "Oh, I'll be right back," and was locked in shoe from there. So I didn't get a humane departure. I didn't get to
Wow.
say goodbye to my family, and I spent 79 days in solitary confinement. And then from the point that I walked out that door with sanctions until I could pick up the phone again and call my family, it was 101 days. I called my
Wow.
kids 3 times a day, 4 times a day. So this was devastating for our family. But
Mm.
everything happens for a reason, and I think that this showed me that somebody needs to fight for this. It's not rocket science. It's not
Yeah.
even okay. I think there's a lot of wonderful and new legislation that needs to come, and there's a lot of changes that have to come. But I'm just about, can we get people to follow the rules that already exist?
Yes.
I think that'd be a great start.
Mm. So, speaking of solitary confinement, what are your thoughts on solitary confinement within the dock system now?
So, um, first of all, solitary confinement is a horrible thing. It doesn't yield any positive results. I walked out of there damaged. I was not the same person who walked in. And I didn't do a traumatic, I mean, I did 79 days, but I mean, there are people who've done years in shoe. I
Yeah.
think the changes that have been made, or the legislation that was passed and intended, is progress. Unfortunately, that is not what we are seeing. HALT was
Hmm.
never properly implemented. HALT is designed to limit solitary confinement to 15 days and then for you to move into a step up program. That step up program is supposed to give you out of cell hours so that you can still do your programming and still work toward earning your way out of that sort of confined environment, but in a more humane manner. Um, there's a lot of things that have gone wrong. First of all, access to tablets is inconsistent from one place to the other. What I think the problem is that incarcerated individuals, at the very least, deserve an expectation of procedural regularity, right?
Hmm.
At the very least, if there is a procedure and it is written down, it should be done the way that it is written down. So if you want to go to program so that you can show your positive progress and earn your way out, you have to sign out for that. You have to, in the morning, sign up a sheet. Well, if they sign that sheet up while everybody is still asleep, don't turn on the lights and not wake everybody up, and then later on tell people they can't go to program because they didn't sign up, what are we doing? Okay. And this is, when we talk about the culture in there, there's a very defiant, I guess, culture. They don't want to change, they don't want to give up. They see everything as either a win for incarcerated people or a win for the COs. And that's not how you develop healthy policy. I studied
Yeah.
public policy in school, and it's very important that you have measurable outcome, that you have, these are, what are we doing with our money? What are we doing with our humans? Most people don't realize 80+% of people that are incarcerated are going to be released to society. How they
Mm.
are released and the state that they come back to us depends very, very strongly on what happens to them in there. And if you are sitting in there and feeling constantly like you are in an unjust situation, You don't come out the other side corrected. You come out the other side
Yeah.
resentful.
Mm.
How are you going to tell me I'm in here because I did something wrong? But now every single thing that's written down that should be done a certain way is completely ignored.
Mm.
You've got
Yes.
prison towns. I've talked about the prison town and the development of the prison town. This is not something that happened quickly. This happened over 3 decades. Slowly, these far off reaches that were placed there for what? Because it was financially viable, right? This real estate. It was distanced from society to keep people safe, right? I
Hmm.
mean, there's reasons why prisons are where they are. And 3 decades ago, you went to the academy and you were sent somewhere. It may not have been your local town. You were sent somewhere. This was a career. You had to roommate with, 2 or 3 other officers and share a little part-time pad and go home, every couple of weeks. For it wasn't the same career. But slowly over
Mm.
time, I mean, it's commerce, right? You've got people there.
Yeah.
You've got staff. You need plumbers, right? They need food. All sorts of commerce. And slowly, what happened was the prison town developed. So you have huge compromise there. You're working with everybody that you're living with. Your kids are going to school together. When you talk about changing a culture, that's a really difficult culture to change. If you want to go against the grain in there as a CO, it can be very challenging at the easiest, dangerous at the most. It's
Mm.
not like COs aren't willing to put their hands on each other the same way that they'll put their hands. I mean, it's all about preserving the environment at all
Mm.
costs.
Yeah.
So,
So,
this is what started it.
gotcha.
I'm sorry, go
You
ahead.
know, no, it's okay. During the strike, we had correction officers screaming to the high heavens because of halt that there was an uptake in violence and facilities all throughout New York State. Do you agree with that? Do you believe because of halt there's more violence in prisons, or do you think that was just a talking point?
Well, since HALT has never been properly implemented, we cannot measure its success or whether or not it's contributed
Yeah.
to anything. Number one, I'm about actual logistical statistics. Show me something on paper. I don't want to hear about how somebody feels about something.
Mm.
The investigator general did a report on HALT and very
Mhm.
clearly stated that the mechanisms used by the Department of Corrections were way too antiquated to even be able to collect the statistics to determine whether or not this was viable legislation or viable policy. The reason people went on strike was to detract attention from a brutal murder that was caught on film, that was going to be unveiled behind in front of everybody. And this was definitely something done to detract from that. Nothing in my heart tells me anything different, and nothing that I've seen. I listen to families, I listen to legislators, I listen to people all day long. They comment on my group, they let me know what's going on.
Mhm.
It was actually our Facebook group that was cited as the reason why the death of Messiah Natwani got out, because we knew there was no information and everybody was just flocking to the group to pull together and to find out who needed what. We had men in there not getting diabetes medication going blind. I mean, there was so much, and families didn't know where to go. And the fact that they all came to New York State Docs Federal Oversight to collectively share their concern, their worries, their information was vital.
Mhm.
And I think the fact that I am piggybacking on a free service that is available and collecting and doing more to really know what's going on in there than all of the collective mechanisms of the entire state of New York's Department of Corrections, there's something wrong. When I am telling legislators, when I am telling the press, when I am telling people what the issues are and they're hearing them from the first time from me, that's a
Mhm.
problem. And I don't know why it has to be this way. Again, my term is we don't need to reinvent the wheel. I don't like companies like Securus and all these other companies that go out there and try to really take advantage of families that want to communicate and charge these exorbitant fees to send photos. However, These companies have already developed software that would give us the ability to streamline forms, to monitor officers, what they're doing, to monitor to monitor the population, the way they move. I mean, if you're a security guard in one of the major companies out there, you have a scanner. When you reach a point of checkpoint where you're supposed to be observing, you have to
Yeah.
scan a little barcode to say you've been there, right? I mean, we're not talking about these incredibly innovative ideas. We're talking about some really basic things. They are still using ledgers. I mean, like Shawshank Redemption, like that era, ledgers.
Hmm.
Okay. It's like their computer systems, just it's absurd. We are New York. We should be in the forefront of humane policies that are effective uses of our taxpayer funds that return people to us healthy. That's how I
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah. And you had mentioned Robert Brooks, and uh, what comes to mind for me is I recall there was an interview that Kathy Hochul did, and she came very, very short of saying that there's a culture of violence within docs. Now, what we saw with Robert Brooks and Messiah Nantry, do you believe these are one-offs, or do you believe this is a
No.
systemic culture of violence amongst our facilities?
Okay, I want to preface this by saying I spent 5 years in the three female facilities in New York State. I spent the bulk of my time in Albion Correctional Facility. I have some very dear, close friends in blue and in green. So when I say this, I don't say it to demonize the entire collective of corrections officers, but this is not a one-off. There
Mm,
is um, there is a perversive nature um, amongst some staff, especially the ones that are second, third generation, the ones that have lived in these communities for a long time, that they are part of the punishment. And that's a problem.
mm,
You are the administrator of a program designed to remedy this problem for our society. You are not part of the penalty. And that's a problem because there's a recidivism problem, and if you see somebody come back 2 or 3 times, I mean, granted, you're going to have feelings about that, but any profession has underlying feelings that we have to learn to sustain for the need of our professionalism, right? I mean, lawyers can't run around and blab about things, right? We have to, I mean, sure, there's probably some juicy stories, attorneys here, right? But they have to
yeah,
sustain, and they don't share them. Why? Because it's a matter of professionalism. It's a matter of duty and honor. Okay, so what that means is if your job is to be a corrections officer, then you should be in a clear understanding of what the pitfalls are of your career, and you should work toward ensuring that you don't fall prey to these very fine lines between you being a CO and you being a jailer, and they're very different things.
yeah,
It's um it's a pervasive problem. It's a persistent problem. When um when we heard about the first murder in custody, I was already dealing with a murder 2 weeks earlier that still
hmm,
hasn't been addressed. I was already at a complete loss and in disgust at that point. And then we all saw those videos. We all saw them. I had to watch them from every angle so I could see what was going on and really understand. And it just doesn't seem like that's enough for people to understand. They're wearing body cameras. They know. I mean, we saw the attitudes of the people watching what was going on, and they were giggling. It's disgusting. I mean, it
Yeah.
clearly was business as usual. There was
Hmm.
nobody in there that looked stunned or shocked. Did you see
Mm.
anybody cover their eyes or grimace? No. So, I mean, what are we talking about? And then, as if that's not bad enough, and we have a strike going on, which I still think was to cover up all of this and to try to detract attention from it. But
Yeah,
then, in the
deflect.
middle of the whole world watching, the entire world is watching New York State. We are on strike. National Guard is in there. Bonfires. They're having barbecues with DJs. And another murder? Another one. Under all of that, if that doesn't show you that there's a perversive culture in there, I don't know what I mean, what else is there to use to convince people?
Mm.
Just watch those videos. Oh, anytime you're confused about it. Those are medical professionals. Those are nurses. Those are there's white shirts in there. I mean, come on. Nobody was stunned. Nobody was shocked. And there was a sick, sick, sick enjoyment in some of those faces. How is this even when we know what we know about power? When we know things
Hmm.
like the Stanford Science Experiment, these are not new concepts. We know that people in these roles have this underlying condition that can occur. We need to do everything that we can do as a society to ensure that there is proper oversight in these environments and that there is um, a military caliber level of professionalism, something like what we
Yeah.
would see in a Marine, what we're seeing in the National Guard. How many times did I not hear that they were treated more humanely by the National Guard than these people
Mm.
that this is their careers? I mean,
Mm.
I'm not sure what else we need to see as a people, but I think judging by the end of the legislative session and the fact that there are still people trying to deflect away from the real problems and use the party line that this is all because of Halt is actually quite disgusting. When we know what we know, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we know that that didn't look
Hmm.
surprisingly new. We know that they have no way to measure whether this is successful. So, who who can honestly say that with a straight face?
Yeah. I think they tried to do the best job that they could in trying to make Halt the boogeyman, so to speak. You know.
Hmm.
So a question about this: do you think it is even possible to change the culture that we avoid having any more Robert Brooks, Messiah Nantries? If so, how? Because I think it's more about or it might be less about legislation, right? Because in my opinion, we have district attorneys. These murders, these beatings have been occurring for decades, and nothing has been done about it. Is it possible to change this? And how do you do so?
We have to. Well, we have to. So, of course, it's possible. I mean, Amazon could deliver the most obscure object across the globe, right? But we can't properly house and help these. It doesn't make sense to me. How do we do? We do it proper oversight. We do it with the proper computerization, with what's going on. With the proper systems and oversight, this can be done. This cannot be done with ledgers and a mentality that's been around for 30 years. I think
Yeah.
personally that we should try to keep out the officers that they're thinking of rehiring. I think it is time for new blood. I think it is time
Hmm.
for them to open their books. Our goal at New York State Docs Federal Oversight is to develop a live reporting system. I want to create a 501c3 that does our own watchdog agency because they're not doing it. I mean, we have SCOC, which is supposed to be the oversight board for the Department of
Hmm.
Corrections. And this new legislation that hopefully our governor will sign, hopefully will expand the number of people on that commission to maybe make it functional. Personally, I think the most important tool that could be used to resolve this right now is creating the Office of the Ombudsman. All right. We need
Mm.
an external third party authority. Right now, if you have a problem within the Department of Corrections, all recourse is to take it back to another entity within the Department of Corrections. The police cannot police themselves. I think we've proven that already. So,
Yeah.
what other states have done, and it's not always been the end all be all, but I think as a good first step to restoring trust would be to create a new external higher authority. If I go through the grievance process and I can't get resolution, I now have to go to court. That's very unfair because that grievance process was designed to be resolved internally. That's why you can't go to a judge until you've gone through the whole process. Because there's all of these, there's grievance, there's a disciplinary procedure, there's parole appeal, right? There's all of these different means that you're supposed to be able to go to get resolution for these issues within the administration. And what's supposed to be the cause that goes to the judiciary are outliers, things that are truly cannot be resolved within the system, the rarity. That's not what's being done. All of these processes have been subverted. They're all treated very adversarially. So if I'm fighting a visit suspension, I went to visit somebody,
Hmm.
let's say I got suspended. If I'm fighting a visit suspension, this should be a process where I go to somebody and I rationally have a conversation with them. I show them what's happened and it gets resolved. That's not what happens. What you're dealing with is attorneys. Attorneys are now arguing with you about whether or not you can get your visits. And these things are being
Mm.
done by, by precedents and cases. That's not what a person, first of all, you're talking about a justice impacted family who was trying to get their right back to visit, right? They don't have
Yeah.
enough problems. Now they either have to go into something they're ill equipped for or hire somebody. I mean, when you talk about a 2 or 3 or 4 tier justice system, I mean, that's what we're discussing here. You have the tier 3 disciplinary process. They recently changed that to allow that you can have an attorney represent you in the internal disciplinary process. Is that not creating yet another multi-tier justice system? So you've got people who can afford to hire a lawyer, and then you have people who can't.
Yeah.
This is not how this was designed to be done. And then when all of that fails, now you get to go into court and file for all of these proceedings to argue with lawyers in court. It's not fair.
Mm.
There should be an office of the ombudsman where you could go to a place that is not compromised, not affiliated, that can look at things objectively and determine whether or not the Department of Corrections followed their own rules. Not whether what they were
Mm.
doing is right or wrong. Are they following their own rules? I mean, that's baseline. And 90% of the time, they're not in some capacity or another. I work,
Mm.
um, my primary job is a paralegal. I work for a law office that does visit suspensions. And I'm disgusted by the scenarios that people have to hire us to deal with. And it's gotten even worse with these body scanners because they're just, I think I see something, you can't visit. And then they get an indefinite suspension. It's not like it's left there. They pursue
Yeah.
it as though there was something there. I mean, it's just absurd. Um, there needs to there needs to be a grown up in the room. And right now, that only grown up looks like it's going to be the Office of the Ombudsman. Um, it didn't get close this time. I'm hoping next session it comes up again. And I was disgusted to see the watered down version of what we
Mm.
received. I was hoping to see some real progress. There were a lot of wonderful pieces of legislation that could have provided a lot of people with recourse. And unfortunately, we got the bare minimum. And it was
Wow.
all done in the name of, these officers are dealing with a dangerous environment. Yes, I understand it's a dangerous environment. Police have dangerous jobs, Marines have dangerous jobs, but it doesn't make it okay to
Yeah.
subvert the rules that are in there and then look at this explosive environment that you create by doing that and go, look at how violent it is. Why is it so violent? What's going on in there? And the biggest question I have is, well, if you're not letting people in through scanners, and you're screening them, and you've got dogs, and you've got legal mail going through scanners, and you've got regular mail being photocopied so they don't actually get the paper copy of whatever was mailed to them, how are all these drugs still getting in?
Mm.
I'm just saying. Because one of the
Yeah.
biggest arguments that I have is, why don't the COs have to go through the body scanners every day? The marshal, there was a huge report that was put out on staff disciplinary. It reads like a police blotter. Some of the things that were done by staff within the Department of Corrections over the course of the few years that's covered in this report is insane. And I think at this point we have to acknowledge that a significant portion of what's getting in there is coming in on two legs wearing blue. And if all of these measures are still not stopping drugs, and we're not scanning every person that comes in, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I don't understand how phones are getting into prisons, okay? Phones. Now, I mean, women are ingenious. I know people have come up with some unique measures to get things into prison. But how are we getting mass amounts of cell phones into prisons? I mean, you're going through metal detectors. Now you're going through body scanners, right?
Yeah.
How are these things getting? You're not mailing them in. The packages have to come now from vendors directly. So, I mean, how long do we ignore what's right in front of us? And
Yeah.
if you're going to look at a problem, you have to look at the whole problem. You can't just look at one problem. And that's the issue with the union. They only want to look at issues that penalize. And here's the problem: where you have somebody and you chain them to a wall, and every time something goes wrong, you remove a link. Eventually, their back's against the wall. All right. You have to incentivize things. We have to try to come up with other methods, because only a crazy person does something the same way and expects new results. I mean, we've
Yep.
been doing this way for this long. So how about we try some new stuff?
Mm. Yeah. Mm. Some time ago, you had mentioned the omnibus bill hopefully about to be signed by Governor Kathy Hochul. In your opinion, like what are the most important parts of that bill?
Uh, I think the most important part of that bill would, if acted upon properly, would probably be the expansion of the state corrections commission. That
Okay.
entity needs to embody their role. Okay, I spent some significant time researching and reading some of their available minutes, and I read, and I mean, honestly, it seemed like all they ever talked about was Rikers and approving funding issues. It's like they never really address these crisis matters. OSI needs to own something. They spend their job, I guess, assessing what occurred and documenting it, but they never do anything about it. They open a report. So you call OSI, you report something's happened. Now, if I'm a family member and I report it, I can never find out again. They're not going to let me know because it's an open investigation. You don't
Yeah.
know what they're doing with it. And in the end, all they ever really do is document stuff. They don't actually do anything about anything that's reported to them. And that's a problem, because this is internal affairs. These are the people who are supposed to be doing it. But a lot of them are, I mean, I'm not going to say, but I suggest that some people look into who's the head of OSI and who they're married to. And, the cross pollination within the Department of Corrections runs very deep.
Yeah.
Everybody is related. This is a problem. This is a real problem. I don't mean a little related. I mean, everybody is related. And you've got people who are like second, third generation. Now they've decided they're going to school for criminal justice and they want to be like mom and dad, but now they don't want to be a CO. They don't want to be a captain. They're going to go work for OSI. They're going to go work for Albany. It doesn't change the fact that everybody knows each other. This is a compromised system, and we need lots of new checks and balances put in place. And I think those are going to be found through technology. Technology is going to be the answer for this. It's the only way to hold people accountable. You're filling out a report and you're entering that report. You hit go and you hit enter. It's not going away. And those things need to be accessible. Attorneys need to be able to access client records, and just like right now, I work out of a law office. I'm a paralegal. I do these suspensions with the law office of Lawrence Omansky. And, we send and we try to have rational conversation with them, and they ignore you. They won't fax anything. They won't email anything. You have to prove that you've mailed things to them, return receipt, certified mail. And then when they mail you the response, they don't have to prove it. So when you're asking for the third time for them to mail something that never got mailed, I mean, what are we talking about here? There's absolutely no accountability. Why can I not email you in this day and age? Why do you not have a fax machine in that office? Like, I don't understand why we're doing what we're doing, other than at this point to subvert these rules. I mean, it's the only explanation. Because if everybody's on board with wanting to resolve this, and it's the year 2025, why are we using ledgers? Why are we using, I don't understand this. It makes no sense. Just on saving value alone and not having paper copy of everything. It's crazy. And you send FOIL to get FOIL information, forget it. Send the Freedom of Information law, you get denied. You have to appeal. They don't want to give you anything. Why? If we're all on board and we're all here for the same reason, to resolve it, and we all want what's right, then why? Why is it only the families and the incarcerated that ever want to see the accountability? Why do they not want to see the accountability in Albany? Why don't they want to see the accountability? If you're a superintendent, why wouldn't you want to see accountability? Except to perpetuate a system. And that's kind of sick.
So what is your call to action to everyone out there watching in terms of how can people help support your cause?
Well, right now, I think we're doing a fundraiser. We are trying to raise money to have this live reporting site. It's very important because it's measurable. You'll be able to go. Anybody can go and see how many incidents were reported at this location. How many family members had an adverse situation with the body scanner on visits last week somewhere. This information should be readily available. So that's an important thing. I think it's time for us to evaluate who we're voting for. And it's not about the governor. It's about our assemblymen. It's about our state senators. These are the people making these choices. I think people really need to get involved and have their voices heard. I would love for everybody who agrees with me to call everybody that doesn't agree with me. I tell people all the time, if this is a legislator who has a problem with what we're trying to do, let's discuss it with them. I encourage my members we have phone numbers, call up and speak to your legislator. There's a lot of people in these communities that feel differently, but they're afraid to speak out. But I don't think that, it's that hard to pick up a phone and get involved, show up at rallies, be heard, but vote. You got to vote.
Yeah. Amen. Is there anything else you want to tell the audience before we close out today?
No, I just want to thank you for having me here. I want to thank my administrators on the Facebook group. We've got Cheryl Cates and April Lee. We've got some amazing people there. Cheryl is the #1 attorney in New York State for Docs Matters. She kicks their butt. And the fact that she agreed to be a participant and to be an administrator in our group is a big thing, because it's hard to lure attorneys to the groups to help people understand things, because often it's just there's a lot of ramifications. It's like things cost money and some things don't. So there's a line between advocacy, and then there's a line between our professional jobs. But if you don't have professional people doing this, then the advocacy really isn't, it's not supported by, prevalent issues. So, but I want to thank you for your attention to all of it, because it's really not a popular issue, and I appreciate people who
No.
bring light and attention to the cause and what we're trying to do. So I just want to thank you.
Oh, no, thank you,
Thank you
thank
for having
you.
me.
Michelle, can I put the link to your Facebook group in the chat? Is that
Sure,
okay?
sure. Absolutely. And my website is michellebonet.com. And if people are looking for assistance with visit suspensions, I do advocacy first. So if I'm taking a call from you, I'll let you know everything you need to do yourself. And then if the problem is bad and you need to hire somebody, we can discuss that. But the goal is really to just let people know what their rights are, let people know. If you come to the Facebook group, we've got files there, we've got phone numbers there, and the most important thing for me is for everyone to feel like there's a place where they can go and get help and find family and
Amen.
find people who are, similarly situated, because we each need to show up for each other.
Amen to that. Also, I dropped the link to your page in the chat as well. So for those of you on the chat and live stream, I included the Facebook group, New York State Docs Federal Oversight. I popped that up on the screen. And then also, in terms of getting a hold of Michelle Bonet directly, this is her website, and you're able to learn more about her. So, Michelle, I want to thank you tremendously for being here. Thank you for the conversation. Much success to you and the families that you serve. And I will talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thanks for having me again. I appreciate you. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Take care. Okay. All right, everyone. That was Michelle Bonet. Again, thanks to Michelle for being here. We greatly appreciate her being here and talking about the issues that incarcerated individuals and their loved ones are facing. Um, if you haven't done so already, please like the video, like the live stream, share it, comment below, subscribe to the channel. And if you feel compelled to do so, feel free to financially contribute to the channel. In terms of Cash App, it's Critical Combo HR, or you can do a super chat or super thanks. But the most important thing is that you support us, like the stream, share the video, and I just want to thank everyone for being here, being committed to this topic. And I will talk to you soon. As I say in all of my videos, my goal is to go deeper than what the mainstream media is telling and sharing with you. Take care. God bless, and see you next time.